Boy, has that song been heard a lot in the last 3 years. Georgia football, ranked number 1 in the country, going after a three-peat. They play here in Nashville against Vandy on Saturday. It's an 11 in the morning game on CBS. And with all of that as a backdrop, we say hello to Palmer Thombs from Dawgs HQ. Palmer, how are you?
I'm doing well, George. Looking forward to getting back to Nashville. Always a fun trip back there. I know last time I was there, got to chat with you all at SEC Media Days, and looking forward to being back in the Music City this weekend.
Tell me this. A lot of people 3 weeks ago started to believe that, yeah, Georgia is number 1, and until they lose, they'll be number 1. To the victor goes the spoils. But I know I was one of those saying I don't think they're at Texas's or Ohio State's or Michigan's level. They're just not explosive enough. And now all of a sudden we've had to do a redo because of this blowout of Kentucky. Were those players hearing that kind of talk?
You know, it's hard to think that they weren't. Obviously with that showing against UAB where they were in a tight one there, early in the half, tighter than expected. South Carolina, they were losing at the half. Auburn, they were tied at the half, but losing during the first half and during the second half some. They played for all the knocks on Georgia's schedule. They played, that schedule a lot tighter than people expected. And so I think that, it was fair to question, Georgia's ranking at number 1. And, I was not surprised in going into any Sunday. I wouldn't have been surprised if Georgia got bumped down from 1 to 2 or 3, because like you said, there were some programs around the country, Texas beating Alabama, Florida State and their early season success against LSU and Clemson. It wouldn't have surprised me to see any of those teams jump Georgia. But like you said, after this past weekend against Kentucky, they certainly seem to have found a little bit of something that's going well for them. And, a lot of that is Carson Beck related. And I think, that's a whole discussion that we could get into with the timing that it took for him to get comfortable offensively, Mike Bobo as the new offensive coordinator, and then Brock Bowers. I mean, there's probably not a better football player. Maybe the quarterback gets valued more valuable player to their team. There might be a couple quarterbacks that you could make that case for, but there might not be a better football player in the country than Georgia's tight end.
Oh, he's an NFL tight end, and he's been an NFL tight end for the last 2.5 years. So let's talk about Beck, because early on it was hard to really know what he is. As you evaluate, you're like, okay, is it they're playing a UL Monroe type, or is it that Beck's really good? So talk to us about where you think these, 6-7 weeks in a row of playing college football has improved him.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid that was a very talented quarterback coming out of high school, out of Mandarin in the Jacksonville area. Waited his turn. And look, a lot of people thought that he was going to be that starter when JT Daniels went down in the 2021 season. There was a lot of speculation that he was getting first-team reps and that he was expected to be the starter for Georgia before they ultimately ended up going with Stetson Bennett, and the rest was history there. Beck waits his turn, and now he's had an opportunity to, remind people what he's capable of. And I think that Georgia's offense has been shaped around him and his skill sets, along with the players that they've got. They don't have a super deep running back room. The offensive line is better in pass protection than they are in terms of getting downhill and opening up holes in the run game, ground and pound football. And when, like we said, when you've got the best player in the country in Brock Bowers, you've got to find ways to get him the ball. And so Georgia has put some pressure on Carson Beck and said, we're going to put the ball in your hands. We're going to let you throw it around. And, certainly the results have paid off. He's 4th in the country in passing yards. Something that people certainly wouldn't have expected from a Georgia quarterback, especially one that's 6 starts into his career. He's top 10 in completions, very highly rated in terms of completion percentage. And so he's been effective with the attempts that they've put on him. And so I have been very impressed, especially like we said, the last couple of weeks, they've found what works for him, what doesn't. You got to get him going early. They got him really comfortable against against Kentucky. Started the game 12 of 12, and that certainly paid off for them on the scoreboard in the end.
What's Bobo's role been in this? Good, not good? Because he had some heavy shoes to fill.
Yeah, and he took a lot of criticism early in this because, like you said, there were such big shoes to fill of Todd Monken, who moved on this past offseason to the Baltimore Ravens as their offensive coordinator. Georgia fans fell in love with him because of what he was capable of doing and the game plans and everything that he did over the last couple of years. Again, obviously he had very incredible players to work with, and it helped to have a quarterback that had the experience that Stetson Bennett did. But Monken was a huge part of the success that Georgia had going on to win those 2 national titles. As they move back to Mike Bobo, there were obviously a lot of thoughts that Georgia fans had coming into that, preconceptions there, that they believed coming into this season, this is going to be, the 2010s all over again. And Georgia's going to be a ground and pound football team. And they were not that at all. They have maintained what what Tom Monken did, schematically, and they have kept a lot of those same philosophies involved. Certainly took some time for Bobo to get comfortable with that and figure out exactly what works best with this group of players that he's got. And like we said, I think it took time for Carson Beck to get comfortable too, because, in all of this, I think that Georgia fans have come away with a much greater appreciation for what Stetson Bennett was capable of doing and the player that he was the last couple of years. Because people assumed Carson Beck, very talented player, just plug and play type guy, and that it was going to be a seamless transition. It's been a solid transition. I wouldn't say it's been seamless, but those two are certainly getting on the same page, as we're 6 weeks into the season.
Kelly, say hello to Palmer Thombs.
Palmer, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing well, Kelly.
I totally agree with you on the Carson Beck deal, because I think it takes time. It takes time from what Stetson Bennett did, and I think it's taking him time. I just wonder, is Georgia the kind of football team that is that good that can kind of sleepwalk through the first part of the season, and then they get this tough test against Kentucky because everybody was talking about Kentucky, and then they wake up and they say, "Hey, yeah, y'all are not ready yet." So, is that the kind of team Georgia is, or we still? I mean, I think we're still trying to find out about everybody, but Georgia's kind of the most complete team. They just had questions at quarterback, which all the SEC teams did, but it seems like he's kind of getting his feet wet a little bit. He's starting to play better, and it looks like the whole team is kind of coming together. And it looked like they kind of sleptwalked to begin the season, but the Kentucky game showed us, they're number one for a reason.
Yeah, and I think if looking at that Georgia schedule, what they've played and what they have to play, I think it was important that Georgia did that against Kentucky because it was their first ranked matchup of the season and first, real challenge there. And also the way that they responded in that first road game at Auburn, in a rivalry game, a hostile environment, because if they didn't do it then and they continued to sleepwalk, even if they continued to win, you're not going to prove anything to a national audience against Vanderbilt. The narrative will just be, oh, well, the competition isn't all that. Then you go into the bye week, and so you're well into the season, almost 2 full months into the season, and you're going into a rivalry game against Florida, a Florida team that's not playing all that well, with questions about what this team is. Because they did that against Kentucky and because they did that in the second half against Auburn, I think that a lot of those doubts have been silenced a little bit. And like you said, there is now a perception that, hey, this is a really complete football team. They've got it going offensively. They've got the quarterback thing figured out. And so, you're moving along well into the season as we pass the halfway point this week. You're moving into the latter half of the season without those questions and concerns.
That's just so. Brock Bowers, you guys talked about him. He may be the best player in college football. You think you'll get? I don't know if there's ever been a tight end as a Heisman Trophy candidate. Do you think he'll be in New York? I think he obviously deserves to be there. What are your thoughts? Give me your thoughts on that.
Those West Coast quarterbacks might have something to say.
Well, they could. I mean,
you're
they
right
could.
there. The West Coast quarterbacks could have something to say. Here's what I will say about Brock Bowers is that, diving into a little bit of the voting process and how it works, each of the voters get to list 3 people on their ballots. And, I don't think Brock Bowers is going to win the Heisman Trophy. I'll come out and say that. But I think that because of the freak that he is and the player that he is for the position and how special he is compared to everyone else that plays that position and really, that plays a position outside of quarterback, the kind of game difference playmaker that he is, game-changing playmaker, difference maker there. He may get some of that second and third place love, and that could be what gets him to New York as opposed to a lot of the first place attention. It's quite similar to Stetson Bennett in that Stetson finished 4th in the Heisman voting last year, but made it to New York because he was one of those top 4 guys. I don't think Stetson Bennett got a lot of love as the top guy, but because of the story that he had and being the best player on the best team in the country, the guy that was a difference maker for them and moved the needle for them, he got a lot of that national respect. I think Brock Bowers could be in the same category. And look, he's got to continue to play incredibly well. He's put up over 100 yards in the last 3 outings for Georgia. He's going to have to continue to do that, and he's probably going to have to do that against some teams later in the season when all eyes are on Georgia. I don't know that what he's done in September and October so far, I don't know that that's what's going to get him to New York. He's going to have a great day against an Ole Miss, a Tennessee, an SEC championship game. Those are the kind of performances late in the season where you can have that quote unquote Heisman moment.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks for him because he's not the quarterback. I mean, they might not throw him the ball. I know they try to get him the ball quite a bit. But, okay, so a complete team. Are there any weaknesses in this Georgia Bulldog football team, you think? Give me your weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, as crazy as it sounds with what Georgia's done the last couple of years, the defensive front is probably the weakest part of this team. Their ability to run the ball offensively and their ability to play up front, stop the run. They gave up over 200 yards to Auburn on the ground. First time that they've given up over 200 since 2018. Obviously, they silenced a lot of those concerns with the way that they shut Ray Davis down this past week. And I think that, as Kirby Smart said it this week, if you're running north-south on Georgia, they've got problems. The way that they design the defense is to push that run game to the edges, east-west type running, and they count on their speed and playmaking ability from all positions to be able to track runners down. So Auburn beat Georgia on the edges with quarterback runs, with perimeter run game, that kind of stuff. Kentucky didn't do that. Now, Georgia made Kentucky pretty one-dimensional, and it was the one dimension that they didn't want to play, being that they, are a run-first team. So Kentucky was forced to pass the ball. I think that, as you look at Georgia's strengths, obviously it's passing game with Carson Beck and Brock Bowers. And look, Ra Thomas has come along, a wide receiver transfer from Mississippi State. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is playing very well, a veteran guy. Lab McConkey is continuing to come back from his injuries. They are playing better offensively, and Dejan Edwards has run the ball well. They are running the ball better than they were. It's still not the strength of that offense. Same goes for the defense on the flip side. They are playing the passing game really well. One of the nation leaders in interceptions. They've got talented players on the back end of that defense with Malachi Starks and Javon Bullard at safety. Kamari Lassiter's an all-ACC caliber cornerback. Tyke Smith has played at an all-SEC level, and Dalen Everett at corner is somebody that's gaining confidence. But they are not great up front. They've got linebackers that are capable of playing well in the box. But if you get Georgia out into the space and force those guys to make plays on the edges, that is not where they are best suited to play football right now. So I would say that is a little bit of a weakness, but you got to take it with a grain of salt. And also probably shouldn't be all too surprising of a weakness, considering you lost 4 first-round defensive linemen to the NFL over the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's true. So my last question is this. Seems like there's a lot of parity in college football this year. I think the transfer portal has an effect on that. I really do. I think kids are going everywhere, and it's like free agency in football. It's making a bad team really good the next year. So I'm just going to put you on the spot. And I'm sure we've asked you this before, but can they three-peat?
I think that they can. If you had asked me this a couple of weeks ago, I still probably would have said that they can, but I wouldn't have felt confident as confident in that. If this Georgia team continues to play the way that they have played the last couple of weeks, they are certainly capable of winning a national championship. They just have to play that way consistently. And in that first half of the season, they didn't consistently show it enough. Like we said, they played with their food a little bit. They slept walk through those games, and they were capable of doing that. Now that they've reached a point in their schedule coming up here before too long where they've got, a stretch of 3-4 games that are going to be really tough. Florida in Jacksonville, Missouri is a team that is flirting with that top 25. Ole Miss is a team that is firmly in that top 25, and Tennessee in that same category. Playing 2 of those games away from home, those teams are tough tests. Georgia has to play its best football when it matters most. And then obviously moving on from there, they're going to play, much better competition in an SEC championship game, should they get there, and the college football playoffs. So when they are playing their best, they are certainly capable of winning in a third straight. Are they capable of doing that consistently? That's the biggest question with this team. I think that they are, and I think that they've shown that the last couple of weeks, but they have to continue to show that.
Palmer, I don't know if you knew this, but Vanderbilt hasn't scored a touchdown on Georgia in 5 years.
19.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so 2018, did you say 2018? 19. Okay, so 19, that was a last-second, touchdown and within the last, 30 seconds, I think. So it's crazy to think about. Is that something you think Smart brings up? Is that any motivation for them to try to say, hey, let's keep the streak going? Because they might get – other than that, there's really not much to look forward to, especially if you're a Georgia fan.
I don't think it's something that'll get brought up this week. And, obviously with that stat, it sounds a lot crazier than it actually is. They didn't play in 2020. And so, I would say that maybe gets used as motivation. A little bit, because that was supposed to be Georgia's senior day game. And so to rip those seniors of that opportunity to have that special moment, maybe that's something that has gotten used over the last 2 games, and maybe it continues to get used. But I don't think that the fact that Georgia has dominated Vanderbilt in the way that they have is going to get used. This team wants to play up to its standard, whether they're playing UT Martin in the opener, South Carolina, Auburn, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida, these big rivalry games, they want to play to that standard each and every week, and you hear it from the players when you talk to them.
Palmer, appreciate you doing this. Hope that you get to see a lot of family and friends when you're in town, and thanks as always for the visit.
Of course. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Palmer.
Palmer Thombs joining us from Dawgs HQ.